Om Ganati Mananda Shanganangana Salakya Chaksurun Militam Yana Tasmai Sri Gurvedama Sri Chaitanya Manobistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupakaramayam Darati Swapanadikam Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chevanarotamam Devam Sarasatim Vyasam Tadojayo Dhyara Neshta Parayasho Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavati Utamashoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Nigamo Kaparagaridam Param Sukhamakaram Mitadrabisamidam Pivata Bhagatam Ashamarayam Mahora Hora Sikha Prabhuvakaham Krishna Swadam Apagate Dharmagan Vihikara Nastadi Shamasha Parana Kodinodidaham Tama Piadavishuta Vishatam Vibhosim Apyade Rabidam Viduksaram Prabhyahidoha Maranam Sanklesha Nirvanamusanti Nanyatam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for starting Wisdom Wednesday off with a bang, Anjali, with a whole bunch of emojis. Thank you, Sanjaya, for joining us. Thank you, Dibya. Thank you, Rupa Manjari. Sanjay, go earlier here. Jimmy and Taruni, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your wonderful PayPal donation of $100 yesterday. Can't imagine how that inspires us and helps us during these lean times. Dayaniti, accept my obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. This will be our third in the series this week, from Motivational Monday to Transcendental Tuesday. Thank you again for starting everything off with a bang. Transcendental Tuesday was yesterday, and this will be our third and final discussion this week, Wisdom Wednesday. Moving forward to the next successive verse in the third chapter, the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 35th verse. Evam Janmani Karmani Hi Akartur Anjanasya Cha Varnayanti Shma Kavayo Vedagyanti Ritpate. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Thus learned men, remember that phrase, learned men. Prabhupada's going to say more about what the difference between a learned man and a so-called learned man is. Thus learned men describe the births and activities of the unborn and inactive, which is undiscoverable even in the Vedic literatures. He is the Lord of the heart. The Lord's described here as unborn and inactive. That doesn't mean he doesn't take his birth. It doesn't mean he doesn't act, but he doesn't take birth like we take birth. He doesn't act like we act. Akarmani, apashara, karmani, saburiman minusi sayukta krisa karma krin. For the Lord, what we see as action is inaction, and what he sees as inaction is action. It's a mystery that only the devotees can understand. Here in the purport, Prabhupada writes, both the Lord and the living entities are essentially all spiritual. Therefore, both of them are eternal, and neither of them has birth and death. This is the elemental teachings of Krishna consciousness, right from the second chapter, 12th verse. Krishna looks Arjuna right in the eye, across about 18 inches of space, as they're both on Arjuna's chariot in the middle of the battlefield, in the midst of the contending armies. And in response to Arjuna's disheartenment at the prospect of having to kill those with whom he has a bodily relationship, his cousin brothers, his teachers, Krishna reassures him, Na tu ebahum jatunasham, naten neme jana, natchaivadim bhavishavi, sarvavaya mata param. Never was there a time, Krishna says, when I did not exist. Well, that's kind of a given. God's eternal. Nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Krishna is asserting here emphatically and early on, establishing the precedents, the foundation of his later arguments, that just as God is eternal, we're also eternal. Not these bodies, of course, but we're not the bodies. Bodies are described a few verses later as just like a coat that gets old and worn out and discarded in favor of a newer one. The bodies are, of course, temporary, but the living force within the body, the Atma, is eternal. It had no beginning, had no end. Oftentimes, for simplicity's sake, we talk about creation and destruction. There's really nothing that's ever destroyed in the creation of the world. Scientists talk about conservation of matter. For instance, when this body dies, the fire part of the body will go back to fire, the earth part of the body will go back to earth, the water will go back to water, the mind will go back to some sort of universal mind. Nothing is really destroyed, it's just disassembled. But matter is ever existing. And if matter is ever existing, then what to speak of spirit? Matter is the inferior energy of the Lord, and we as spiritual beings are parts and parcels of the superior energy of the Lord. So, although we use the word creation, we don't really mean that we were not in existence and then we came into existence. That would contradict Krishna's axiomatic truth right here in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings. So that means that although we use the word creation in certain contexts, we're never created. We never come into being from not having been into being, nor do we ever cease to be at any time in the future. And if you think about it, we're aware that we exist now, and we know we existed in the past. We can't imagine any time in the past when we didn't exist, nor can we imagine any time in the future when we'll cease to exist. We just kind of go along with the presumption that as I'm existing now, I existed in the past, I'll continue to exist in the future. You can't conceive of not existing. That's an oxymoron. So existence is a continuum. It never came into being, nor will it ever cease to be. Just as God never came into being whenever he existed before the sun, the moon, the stars, before Shiva, before Brahma. That's before the outward phenomenal manifestations of Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, etc., etc. But the internal, the living entities who make up all the population of the material and spiritual worlds, we also had no beginning. There was a time when we manifest in a certain body, in a certain shape, for a certain purpose, but we have no beginning. We're never created. It's a bigger word, and sometimes we avoid using it. But if you want to be really, really specific and accurate, there was a time when we were manifest. At the annihilation of the cosmic manifestation, everything is retracted back into the body of Vishnu and goes into a sort of a yoga nidra, sleeping state. And then we're manifested later on, and those who haven't developed pure love of God spring up amongst the 8,400,000 species of life and resume their activities from a previous manifestation. So we're manifest and unmanifest. We're not created and dissolved. Let's just put that idea to rest. And so whenever you hear Hare Krishna talk about creation, you could slip in the word manifestation instead. So what Krishna is saying to Arjuna here is basically said to all persons in the world who pose themselves as learned, but actually have a poor fund of knowledge. Those who are accepted as learned in modern society mostly accept the body as the self. So whether they have PhD, PhD, LSD, whatever letters they have after their name, if they don't understand the difference between the soul and the body, if they don't understand that they themselves as a living force are eternal, they're not actually learning. They're just poseurs or imposters. Learning, education, knowledge starts with this point that Krishna, as well as all the individual souls, parts and parcels of Krishna, that were assembled on both sides at the battlefield of Kurukshetra, are eternally, read my lips, eternally individual living beings. And the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living beings, both in their conditional and their liberated situation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is a supreme individual, but as emanations from him, we are also individuals. Nitya nityanam, chaitanas chaitanam, ekyo Vidadati Kaman. The Lord is individual. He's one. He's supreme. We are also individual, but we are plural. There is an essential difference between the one singular eternal individual and the many plural eternal individuals, and that is that the singular is supreme. He is the source of all others, and having created us, he maintains us. Sarva yonishu kantya mortya samabhada tajma brahm aham yadir aham bija pradabhita. Krishna says, aham bija prada. I am the seed-giving father of all living beings. So, what decent father, having produced children, would then fail to maintain them? Even ordinary parents do their best to maintain them, and we see that according to income, they'll have so many children. If the income is less, they'll only have 1 or 2 children. If the income is more, and they know they can support them, they'll have 4 or 5 or 6, or if you're in Utah, 10 children. There was a joke at the beginning of the pandemic when the governor decreed that not more than 10 people should gather together. The joke was circulating around that many Utah householders were trying to decide who had to move out. A father has as many offspring. No emojis there, guys? Didn't you get it? A father has as many offspring as he can afford to maintain. So God produces all living entities, innumerable, uncountable living beings, as his offspring, as his byproduct. So he assumes happily, generously, open-handedly the responsibility. Took you a while, but you finally got on board with the joke. So he maintains all living beings. So our existence as the eternal plural living beings is dependent upon and rests upon the largesse, the generosity, the bountifulness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who tells us through Arjuna, he's speaking to Arjuna, but really he's speaking to all of us, that our individuality existed in the past, our individuality will continue in the future without interruption. So the conclusion that Krishna wants Arjuna to reach here is that he'll not in fact be killing any of the soldiers on the opposing side. I'll take this opportunity to launch into a verse or two of my spiritual rap song. The inner soul continues when the outer body dies, like flame from wood sparks ascending, transcending dark matter, blending with the sky, invisible to the naked eye. You cannot kill nor can you die. You cannot burn nor can you fry. The soul cannot be scorched by any blaze. The water cannot drown the spirit. The wind cannot make it fade. You cannot cut another, nor can you bleed. The soul is eternal, unborn, a seed, indivisible, indestructible, forever free from birth, death, old age, and disease. Yet howsoever turned or tossed, the soul can never itself exhaust. Seated in the heart, beating its drum, powering everyone, brighter than the sun, the soul's superior force lives on and runs its endless course in God's unlimited universes. As a cloud is seated on air, so spirit supports the flesh. Take away the living force, it's just chemicals lying there, a corpse naked and bare. Not a twitch or wiggle, not a subtle wink or giggle. Can't tickle it or puzzle it with a riddle. Deaf, blind, mute, dumb. Can't reward it, can't ignore it, can't restore it. Deader than a doornail, stiffer than a board. Only thing to return it, burn it, bury it. Earth to earth, dust to dust, ash to ashes. Infirm body versus immortal soul. Learn the difference, conquer ignorance, make a spiritual choice. Sing out, rejoice, give voice, make some noise for the spiritual force. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you. Thank you very much for all of your support in the form of those fireworks on the right-hand side of my screen here. So we are eternal. We never really are created. We're just sometimes manifest and sometimes unmanifest. But the Lord is always manifest. There is never a time when the Lord is unmanifested, and there's never a time when the Lord is forced into a womb by the karmic reactions of his previous activities, packed there for 9 months, and then expelled out with a blast of air, crying and covered with blood and placenta and all like that. That's us. That's not the Lord. We take birth and accept death again, and rebirth and death. Jatasya hidru vomitir dhruva janma Tajmaradisha Yudhaya Kutanishtanam. For one who is born, death is certain, and if you're not in pure Krishna consciousness, if you haven't invested the human form of life in cultivating love of God, then it says that for one who is dead, birth is certain. The conditioned souls revolve in this cycle from birth, old age, disease, death, birth, old age, disease, death, being bound by the laws of material nature. But the so-called appearance and disappearances of the Lord are not the actions of the material nature, rather they are the manifestations or demonstrations of the internal potency of the Lord. The Lord is never touched or affected by or conditioned by karma, but we are. We're both spirits, but he's so powerful that he's above karma, just like the sun is always above the clouds. But we are like the little people who walk on the surface of the earth, look up and say, oh, the cloud has covered the sun. That's the difference between ourselves and God. We tend to become conditioned and covered by this material nature. However, Krishna says, those who surrender unto me, they quickly overcome the shortcomings of the modes of material nature. In the 14th verse of the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Song of God, Krishna again tells Arjuna, Namam karmani limpati name karma phalas priyaha iti mamyo bhajandati karma birna sabhadyate. He says, I am not affected by karma. I'm not bound up by karma. I'm not defined by the fruits of my actions. And what's very important for us are the 3rd and 4th lines of this verse, iti mamyo bhajandati karma birna sabhadyate. Those who know this truth about me, we know the truth behind the appearance and disappearance of the Lord, that he's not bound by karma. He comes here in his original spiritual body of his own sweet will, who know the difference between a living being and God. They also are truly learned men, and as a result of this knowledge, they also become free from the reactions of their work. I'll ask you a question that may help illustrate this point. Normally we can walk, 3, 4, 5, 6 miles an hour. If you're running, I remember my running days, I used to be able to do, I think about up to, when in my peak, probably 9 miles within an hour. That's really booking it. But what, say, 50 steps can you take that then you're going 800 miles an hour? Give you a moment there. You can type it in the comments if you like. You get some brownie points afterwards if you beat me to it. What 50 or so steps can you take after which you're going 800 miles an hour while sitting? You don't even have to work then. The work is being done for you. Your body is being propelled to where you want to go at 800 miles an hour. And all you had to do is take 50 steps and go into a seat. Yeah, of course, you've got it now. It's on an airplane. When you become one with the airplane, then you assume the power of the airplane. So similarly, when you attach yourself in service, bhakti yoga, to the lotus feet of the all-powerful Lord who creates millions and millions of universes, for whom nothing is impossible, who knows everything, past, present, and future, who is in the hearts of all living beings, then you take off. You've got God's breath behind your sails. And as an instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead doing his will, you do not incur karma. If I hit you with a stick, the stick is not responsible. The person who wields the stick is responsible. So our process is to allow ourselves to be wielded by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is the course of action which is karma-free. One no longer accrues karma. One is no longer bound by the laws of action and reaction in this material world. So the Lord is like the king. There's a saying, the king can do no wrong. The king himself is the enforcer and the creator of the state laws, but he himself is not subject to the state laws. Similarly, the Lord is the creator of the material and spiritual worlds. He's the owner. As the creator, he's also the owner and the proprietor. So he is not responsible for the right and wrongdoing of the workers in his establishment. The workers themselves are responsible. After all, God gives us a beautiful, resplendent world full of abundance and full of completeness, a world which could support even 10 times the present population. So if we have spoiled the world, polluted the water, spoiled the land, created climate change, it is not anything for which God is responsible. We have to accept the responsibility ourselves. People say, well, if God's a loving God, how come there's suffering? If you walk off the edge of a 10-story building and break your bones or put yourself into a coma, God didn't do that to you. You were careless. There are certain basic laws which hold things together, which make activity and effort and exertion and ambition possible. So you have to be aware of those laws, and you have to be careful as you move from here to there. If you're careless and you ignore the law of gravity from the rooftop of a 5-story building, it has nothing to do with God. He's not in any way to be blamed or responsible. And he asserts this in the Bhagavad Gita. Nadate kasitid papam nadchaivam sukha agani nadvitam ganam tenam yanti jantavaham. He says, I do not accept the results of anyone's pious or sinful activities. If you want to be the doer, if you want to be the actor, if you don't care to put yourself in the middle of what God created you for, but you want to spin out your own purpose and your own activities in this material world, then not God anymore, but you become the doer. And whatever good and bad results you create, they are your responsibility and no one's else. And especially if you act in such a way as to transgress the laws of material nature, as to engage in activities which are not or specifically prohibited by the Lord, then, of course, the karmic reaction is going to be especially severe. The best that living beings, in a general sense, can imagine in this material world, those who call themselves good people, progressive people, pious people, people who tend towards the mode of goodness, generally speaking, the greatest destination of which they can conceive is to be elevated to the planets of the demigods, and they aspire to heavenly happiness after death. Do good work, be charitable, be philanthropic, be sensitive, be compassionate, serve out food at the local soup kitchen, donate blankets for the homeless at the winter, and having invested in this way in this life, look forward to, after death, getting promoted to the heavenly planets where one can then enjoy the fruits of those activities. However, enjoyment within the heavenly planets has no appeal to the Lord. We, generally speaking, the most we can conceive of is living a long life with relatively few miseries and a higher standard of living on one of the heavenly planets. But that is not attractive at all for Krishna, because he lives in the imperishable spiritual world. You can't get to where Krishna lives by accumulating brownie points or being so-called good in this material world. Good doesn't cut it. Good is not good enough. Good will get you a temporary birth in the upper planets. However, when the sum total of your pious activity is exhausted, then you sink back down to this world of birth, death, disease, and old age. As the proprietor and as the creator, Krishna never desires the low-grade happiness which is available in this material world. The standard of happiness for the owner, the creator, and the proprietor is different than the standard of happiness for the workers who work in his enterprise. He is aloof from all material actions and reactions and aspirations. And those who are his devotees generally speaking, they aspire to go back to home, back to Godhead, and not for any temporary result in this material world. Devotees know antabantu phalam tejam tad bhavati apanmedisham deva deva yajanti majagiri pimam shimam. The devotees know that the benefits, the benedictions that can be had from a pious, good life, from worshiping the demigods, from aspiring to go to where the demigods go, are temporary and limited. They are also easily achieved, temporary and limited, and as such they exhaust themselves and you end up right back where you started in the beginning. So if you're going to exert energy in a certain way, and you are a progressive, upward-looking person, then Krishna tells you that good is not good enough. He loves you too much to leave you as a pious, righteous, God-fearing person. He loves you too much to have you be stuck in some religion, some ism, but he encourages us to sarva dhammam parityaga. Give up piety, give up righteousness, give up so-called religion, sectarianism, give up goodness in favor of the greatness of worshiping the Lord. Don't settle for anything less. We are eternal, and we'll only be happy when we're situated in the eternal kingdom of God. Anything less is less than what God wants for us. He states this in the 20th verse of the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Kamas tastya ganaha prabhadyantena tam tam niyamavashta niyata prakadashraya. Those worship the demigods whose intelligence, again, poor fund of knowledge, has been stolen by material desires. They surrender the demigods and worship them according to the rules and regulations, according to their own nature. Those who want wealth, they worship Lakshmi. Those who want a beautiful wife, they worship Parvati, the wife of Lord Shiva. Those who want good crops, they worship Indra. Those who want health, they worship the sun god. Prabhupada says, less intelligent persons who have lost their spiritual sense. Remember, we started this discussion with Krishna assuring Arjuna that you are not temporary, you are eternal. Never was there a time when you did not exist, nor me, nor all those kings. Therefore, it can only be a less intelligent person who wastes the valuable human form of life in order to achieve the temporary benefits and the level of the demigods. Such people obviously do not go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they are still within the lower modes of material nature, ignorance, passion, and sometimes goodness. They worship the demigods according to their own nature. Prabhupada says the worship of the demigods are motivated by small desires and do not know how to reach the supreme goal, but devotees of the Lord are distinguished by not being misguided or misled. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela, 142nd verse of the 5th chapter, a verse I'm sure most of you are very familiar with. Ekala Ishvara Krishna Ara Sababrita Yare Yaiche Nache Sai Taiche Tare Nita. Krishna Ekala Ishvara Krishna. Krishna and Krishna alone. After all, someone asked me the other day, so Krishna is your God? God means one. It's not your God, my God. God means one. There's not many. Of course, being all-powerful, he can expand himself. But the fountainhead, according to all Vedic scriptures, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is Krishna. Krishna is the source of Vishnu, the source of Brahma, the source of the sun and the moon and the stars. So, Ekara Ishvara Krishna, there's one supreme controller, Ada Sabya Brita. All others are his servants. They dance as he asks them to dance. In that famous scene, when Vritrasura, who had been the devotee Chitraketu in his past life, faces off with Indra. Indra is so intimidated by the size and ferocity of Vritrasura. In this connection is explained that Vritrasura was a devotee and Indra was the non-devotee. Because Indra had he lost his nerve in order to go ahead and kill Vritrasura. Even Vishnu himself had assured Indra that if he endeavored in this regard, he would be successful. But Indra doubted the word and the support and the mission of the Lord, whereas Vritrasura had no doubt whatsoever. He wanted to leave off his demoniac body and get back to a devotional body where he can serve the Lord. And so he had to give Indra a pep talk in order to get Indra to kill him. And in the course of that, he said, because Indra was thinking, if I throw this weapon at him, will he just become more angry? Will it just tick him off more, and then he'll pulverize me or annihilate me? Indra is thinking in terms of hot and cold, honor and dishonor, defeat, victory. And Vritrasura just said, don't worry, do what you've been commissioned to do. Victory or defeat, victory is ordained for you, defeat is ordained for me, and it is all completely under the control of the one Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. These are the words that Vritrasura used to encourage Indra to throw his thunderbolt. Loka shapya shamesha shanti vibhacha dvija vasichibada sakala edakarinam. If you're following the verses, this is from the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 12th chapter, 8th verse. All living beings and all planets of the universe, including the demigods who preside over the heavenly planets, Indra, Chandra, and so on and so forth, Varuna, Kuvera, are fully under the control of the Lord. They work like birds caught in a net who cannot move independently. Vritrasura continues addressing Indra, since we are all under the control of the Supreme Lord according to our karma, no one is independent, even from Brahma, the creator of this universe, down to the insignificant ant. Whether we are defeated or whether we are victorious, the Supreme Lord is always the predominating entity because everyone acts under his directions. Therefore, without considering victory or defeat, gain or loss, we should simply, each and every one of us, act as a matter of duty, act as instruments to the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, early on, Subho ashubho falerina moksha se kama sanyasya yoga kamani vimukta mam upasati. Without considering auspicious and inauspicious. What is auspicious? It's from my point of view. Someone once quipped, auspicious is when I steal your wife and cattle, and inauspicious is when you steal my wife and cattle. So so-called auspicious and inauspiciousness is calculated from our limited self-centered point of view. But Krishna has the big perspective. He sees the big picture. So when you act according to Krishna's instructions, you're above auspicity and inauspicity. You're above relativity. Mam chiyo vichaya bhakti yogana sagunam smiti tatyam brahmamaya kalpate. Those who act according to the prompting of Krishna are not under the modes of material nature, but they're acting under the direct shelter and protection and in the same nature as Krishna. So one should aspire to become free from both auspicious and inauspicious results. One should simply fix one's mind on Krishna, do what Krishna says, and be consequently renounced from the good and bad of this material world, achieve liberation, and go back to home, back to Godhead. The poet said, "The servant craveth not, except to serve with might. I was not told to win or lose. My orders are to fight." At this point in our discussion about the demigods, someone may raise the question, if the demigods are different parts of the body of the Lord, and they're sometimes described as the arms, the administrative representatives of the Lord in each and every universe, then the same end should be achieved by worshiping the demigods as by worshiping Krishna, because they're part of the body. So what difference does it make whether you worship the demigods or Krishna? Well, what difference does it make where you put your food? I mean, there's various holes, there's various orifices in the body. So by this argument, if worshiping, directing your energy and your worship and your offerings to the demigods would achieve the same result as directing your worship and your offerings and your energy to Krishna, then by that argument, you should be able to put food in any hole. You should be able to put food in the ear. You should be able to put it in the eye. You should be able to put it somewhere else. But you can't. You have to put the food into the mouth. You can't get around that. So You can't supply food through the eyes or through the ears or through the nose. You can only supply food to the mouth. So similarly, the only proper worship of a learned person on the path of liberation is to worship exclusively and completely Krishna. And in doing so, it's like putting food into the mouth. When you do that, not only the mouth and the stomach are satisfied, but that nourishment and that vigor goes to all the different parts of the body. Doing the one thing, every other purpose is served. And the result will not be that you get a better position within this temporary material world of birth, death, disease, and old age. No, the result of putting food in the mouth, the result of undivided devotional service, bhakti yoga, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is that you will transcend. Leaving this present body, you'll never again take birth due to karmic reactions in this material world, but you will attain that supreme destination, having attained which one never returns. Everybody who goes to the planets of the demigods will see them again. Have a nice vacation, have a nice stay, have a nice life. It may last for hundreds of thousands of years. You have an unimaginable standard of living, but we'll see you later when it's all done and you've dropped back down here to this material world. But those who, by virtue of devotional service to Krishna, leave the current body, they ascend in their original spiritual bodies, never to be seen again by the denizens of Mritu Loka, this world of birth, death, disease, and old age. What are some of the characteristics that were given to us about that spiritual world? In the 29th verse, 5th chapter of the Brahma Samhita, the creator of the universe, Lord Brahma, says of that spiritual world, Chintamani pakara sadmashu kalpa vriksha laksha vitasu surabhiya bipalanti lakshmi saha sadbrahma sevamanam govinamari purusham tamahang majami. What is that spiritual world like? Far beyond the planets of the demigods, that world going which nobody ever came back to this material world again. Well, everything is made of touchstone, Chintamani. There are trees there called kalpavriksha, or desire trees, which yield the votary, the petitioner, anything they want for the service of the Lord. Cows give unlimited quantities of milk, and the Lord resides there on a jeweled throne. Shri Sri Radha Govinda Deva Prashtalabihi Sevamana Shmarami, underneath a tree whose roots are composed of all valuable jewels, worshipped by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis, goddesses of fortune, who cannot leave the Lord's side even for a moment. In the Bhagavad Gita is said that the Lord's so-called birth and activities in the material world are all divyam, transcendental. And those who understand this, those who meditate upon the activities of the Lord and involve themselves as servants in the mission of the Lord here, they attain God realization. They attain the nature of the Lord and become once and for all liberated by material bondage. In the scriptures it is said that the birthless appears to take birth, that the Supreme appears inactive by our standards of activity and inactivity, but because he is omnipotent, everything is performed by the Lord automatically and naturally. As a matter of fact, the appearance and disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his activities are not comprehensible by mundaners, by mental speculators, by yogis. People with a poor fund of knowledge cannot taste the nectar of honey inside the bottle. They're licking the outside of the jar, trying to understand what it contains. It is not possible. So these activities are manifested and displayed by the Lord as a special concession, as special mercy to the conditioned souls. And we who are fortunate enough to be connected to the Lord through the parampara, the chain of disciplic succession, and to associate with and be trained by bona fide spiritual masters, representatives of the Lord, make our lives successful by taking advantage of the narrations of the Lord as passed down through the bona fide chain of disciplic succession and Thus, meditate on the absolute truth in his most convenient, accessible, merciful, and palatable form. Serve him in this life, and in the next life, go back to home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling connected. I'm feeling hooked up. Yes, I think you are too, from the emojis there. Jimmy and Taruni, Divya, Dayaniti, Rupa Manjari, Anjali, Hare Krishna, W.W. Sanjay, Vaibhavi, Rakesh, thanks for joining us. Prashant, he's our scholar. Joe, Hare Krishna, Vaibhavi, Rajdeep, thanks for joining us, Rajdeep. I haven't seen you too often. Guru Charan, back, nice to see you after some time. Govinda Dev, Gopi Shwara, my old friend from Los Angeles. Sundari Priya. We welcome your comments, your suggestions. Prashant, Govinda, a lot of names coming up again. We use Rishangi, thank you so much. All right. Yeah, please be free with your comments, with your emojis, with your likes, with your shares, with your joins. We're partners. I hope this is not just a one-way street, but it's a give and take process. We're all in this together, and we hope to all go back home, back to Godhead, leaving not one straggler behind. So we'll have a hiatus of a few days until we come back next Monday. We hope that you remain in pure Krishna consciousness. You do have the option of hooking up with us again on Saturday and Sunday nights and Sunday morning. But if we don't see you again before next Monday, please fill your days with the chanting and the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. I'll chant the mantra along with you for a couple more times in case you want to sign us off for the week with a whole flurry of emojis there. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Once more, and I'll do it as slowly and as drawn out as possible. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Look forward to reading your comments, responding, to getting together again in the very near future. Haribo. I just can't bring myself to interrupt them. They're still coming. Hari, 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 Haribo. All right, here we go. Om Tat